Well, it is wonderful to see you all. My wife and I were in Colorado over the Christmas holidays. And one night after all our kids were playing with their cousins and they were all wound up and they were trying to wind down, it was time to read some books there at Grandma and Grandpa's house. And I was reading with Silas and Hadley, two of my kiddos, and they had each picked different books. And so Silas wanted to read his first, and we ended up reading his first because Hadley was doing something. But then she comes over and sits down with her book, and she starts fussing, right? She starts interrupting, and I said, Hadley, hold on, don't interrupt. We're reading Silas's book. But her fussing grew louder and louder to the point where I couldn't ignore it anymore. And then I finally I listened to what she was saying, and she said these words. She said, I don't see the doctor. Where's the doctor? The doctor's not here. And then she said it again louder and louder on the verge of tears. So I go, what are you talking about? What's going on? She said, I don't see the doctor. Where's the doctor? The doctor's not here. So I pushed pause on reading with Silas, and then I actually turned my attention to the book that Hadley's holding. And the book is the sleep book. Now, who wrote the sleep book? Dr. Seuss. Okay, you see what's going on? She knew it was a Dr. Seuss book, and she says, I don't see the doctor. The doctor's not here. Where's the doctor? And she keeps flipping through the book, looking at every page, going, where's the doctor? I don't see him. Right? In frustration, she's flipping through all of these pages, but she can't find Dr. Seuss anywhere. And so meanwhile, all day I've been studying Esther, and then this thing happens. I was like, oh my goodness. Right? So I begin to explain, sweetheart, right? Dr. Seuss is the author. He's the one who actually drew all of these pictures. I know you don't see him there with the Hinkle Horn honking club. I know you don't see him there with the curious sleepwalking Crandalls who are walking around with candles on their heads. But he is there literally on every page. Each page is what it is because of who Dr. Seuss is, right? He's there on page left, and he's there on page right, on down to the ground and up to the burble blue sky, right? He's there in the night of Nanup and the Ziz-Zaz rain with Kitty O'Sullivan Krause and Yertle the Turtle King. Right? He's there in Whoville and Mount Crumpet, and on the train he's there in the Tale of Horton and Cindy Lou Who, the Walk It in Your Pocket Thing 1 and Thing 2. Right there he is, from the Sneetches to Sam I Am to Mr. Knox to the Lorax, the Wuzzits, and of course, the Fox and Socks, right? So it took a while to explain all of this. But then she goes, oh, okay. I went back to thumbing through the pages, and she was quite happy knowing that Dr. Seuss was there on every page, right? Something akin to this is actually what's going on with the book of Esther, and I don't just mean the Dr. Seussian names of Xerxes and Mordecai and Haman. Right, because we can thumb through the pages of the book of Esther and say, where's the doctor? Where's God? I don't see him. He's not there. After all, one of the most curious facts of the book of Esther is that God is not mentioned. In fact, some people believe that this book should not be in the Bible because God is nowhere mentioned. It seems like an incredibly secular book. Why is it there? Oh, but he is. And that's one of the things that we're going to be seeing through this sermon series. So today, we begin our exploration of the book of Esther, one of the greatest books ever written. It's literarily brilliant. My jaw has just been on the floor for the last couple months studying the structure and the intricacies of this thing. It's literarily brilliant. It's history. It's curious. It's weird. There's genocide and gallows and sex trafficking, oh my, it's just stuff everywhere. But it has much to teach us. So here's what we're going to do. Each week we're going to read a chapter. I won't actually read a chapter to you, the whole thing. I'll distill the story, I'll tell the story, and then we'll focus in on certain passages. So each week we'll do about a chapter. Some weeks we'll do 2 chapters. There's 10 chapters overall, and we'll be in it for 2 months, and we'll work our way through the whole thing. So with that said, let's go ahead and get up to speed as best as we can in the shortest amount of time as we look at chapter 1 here today. Let's get some context into this glorious story where we see God's hidden work in this world. Now, a quick note. The sermon series is called The Curious Story of Esther, Xerxes, Mordecai, and Haman, and ... When I use the word story, that doesn't mean this is false. It doesn't mean that this is a made-up tale, right? The word story means that it is a telling of or an account of something. In fact, this is a historical account. Everything about it is written as history. The internal evidence is that this is written as history, and the external evidence is just absolutely overwhelming. So not only internally is there evidence, but there's all sorts of external evidence. The father of history, as they call him, Herodotus, right? This Greek historian wrote extensively about this guy named Xerxes. And we have all sorts of information written through these old histories, but we also have all sorts of information written in stone and stuff that's been dug up. And so let's go back a couple thousand years to the reign of Xerxes, okay? The reign of Xerxes. He ruled an empire that was called Persia. Okay, so Persia was this massive, massive empire. And he reigned from about 486 to 465 BC. So some 400 years, 4,500 years before Jesus was born, okay? So here's the empire, and I threw up a map here. You can see how massive this empire was, stretched from Ethiopia all the way to India. Now, researchers say at this point in the world there's about 100 million people, and 50 million of those people were in this empire. So he ruled as king over half the entire world. Like ratio-wise, this is the only time that's happened. That is the biggest number ratio-wise. He ruled over 50 million people in this empire. It was absolutely massive. Xerxes was called the king of Persia and Media, the great king, the king of kings, the king of nations, the king of the world. And he was even called Pharaoh over Egypt because you can see Egypt was there in his kingdom. This was a king with a great appetite for power and control. His father was Darius, so he was born in the purple. He was born into this royal family. You could say he probably grew up a little bit spoiled. And so he wanted to conquer more and more. And in fact, he led all sorts of further invasions. You can see up there to the upper left where it says Thrace and Macedon that Greece had not been conquered by Persians. So he wanted to conquer more and more. So he led a few expeditions in 480 and 479. He went to fight the Greeks. And you might have seen the movie 300. If so, you don't have to raise your hand and indict yourself. But 300, right? That's about the Battle of Thermopylae, right? The Spartans, the 300 Spartans that held off the Persians. Well, who's the bad guy in that movie? Xerxes, right? Xerxes is the bad guy, and that Xerxes in the movie is actually the same Xerxes that is in the book of Esther. And so Xerxes and his immortals, his Persian forces, his 10,000 plus bodyguards, and his hundreds of thousands of soldiers went in, and they were actually held off at Thermopylae for a while, but then they beat the Spartans, and they went further into Greece, but then they got whooped. And then they ended up going back. And this guy, he's a character. You're going to see. Man, there's all sorts of interesting anecdotes in history about him. He had a temper. He was quite immature in many ways. At one point, there was a body of water that kept his troops from advancing. So he ordered his troops to whip the water with chains to teach the body of water a lesson. Right? And like that's how his pride was chafed by a body of water. So he had the thing whipped. Now he ruled from the capital called Susa, right there in the middle, modern day Iran. Persepolis was also a capital. That's kind of where his father ruled from. But his throne, his kingdom was right. The center of it was right there in Susa, and all sorts of evidence has been unearthed that reveal to us so many of the facets of who he is through the book of Esther. Like, it's fascinating. I won't take a ton of time on this, but it was helpful for me to see, so we realize that this isn't just a story in the sense of this is some made-up thing to put forward some kind of principle or whatever, that this is history, right? This is history. So here's a relief of Darius and Xerxes. The guy sitting on the throne with the nice beard there, that is his father Darius. So this is when Darius ruled. And then the guy behind him is the heir apparent. That is Xerxes, right? So you can see he looks just like his dad, has the long beard there. He's sitting behind the throne, and eventually he will sit in that throne. So this is a carved relief that you can see. That was found there in Persepolis in what we call modern-day Iran. If you zoom in, can we zoom in real quick? So that's a little bit of what Xerxes looked like. So we have some rendering of this figure. So that's history. Let's see what Hollywood does with him. Oh, there's Hollywood. That's from 300. Let's go history. History. Let's go Hollywood. Hollywood. One more time, history. And then Hollywood. You can see there's a little bit of a difference in how he's rendered and what Hollywood does. But it's interesting to me that we have this image of this king who is painted in words in the book of Esther. We have all sorts of other stuff. The tomb of Xerxes. Let's go ahead to the next one. This is in Iran as well. This is where Darius is buried, and Xerxes' tomb is there, carved out of the rock to the far right. What's the next one? What do you have next? Okay, so this is Susa. So if you go there now, right, this is the foundations of the palace. So the palace that we read about, that all the events take place in Esther, here's the foundations of it. There's just portions of it. The rest of it is just 10, 20, 30 feet underground. But there it is. Next. So this palace, this kingdom was so opulent. This kind of stuff was everywhere. Here's a griffin. All the Harry Potter fans are excited right now. But these were glazed, baked bricks they're brilliant and beautiful and technicolor. I think we have another one so here's another one where you can see the color baked into these bricks. So all the walls of this palace displayed his power and displayed his might. These are the immortals. The immortals are his bodyguard. He had 10,000 of them. They were called the immortals because anytime any of them died, he just replaced them, and there was always 10,000. They were just this replaceable troops that they were always 10,000 to protect him. So that's his bodyguard, the immortals there with their bow and arrows, and that was their main weapon was the arrow. Okay, next. This is called the Gate of All Nations in Persepolis. This is one of his many building projects. Point being, this is history that we're dealing with. And it's easy to read the book of Esther and it's all of its bizarre nature and just put it into some mythical cloudland in our head. It's history. Now, who wrote this book? Well, we don't know. It's anonymous, right? We don't know. Some people think it's Mordecai, some rabbis do. But all in all, we have no clue who wrote this book. The author's name is unknown, which is interesting to me because, as I mentioned before, the book itself doesn't name God. God's name, references to him are curiously absent. And this is really strange because this book is obsessed with names. Like if you read through it this week, you'll be like, it names everyone. It names eunuchs. It names all these different servants, counselors, politicians, bit parts, and secondary characters. Like everyone is named, but strangely, not God. It's like the author is bending over backwards to say, do you get what I'm doing? Everyone is named, but who, right? It's like if someone were to take a marker and to color a piece of paper entirely, but leave a circle in the middle where it's just raw white paper. What would you notice on that paper? That circle, right? And you'd say it's all colored, but that circle, what's going on there? And the author is saying, there be God here, right? God is here, and he's revealed in a different kind of way than we normally see him. Or, go back to my daughter's experience. The doctor is invisibly but overwhelmingly present on every page. Now, you can say the book of Esther is about all sorts of things, because with stories, with accounts, you can say they're about all sorts of things because they are about all sorts of things. But the book of Esther is about God's providence. And that's a theological word, and that word providence means how God governs the world. This book is about how God governs the world among many other things, which we're going to see. And much of how he governs the world is hidden from our purview. It's not seen until retrospection, right? But God is at work governing the world. Now, I could go on about the brilliance of the book, its design and its subtleties, and we'll get into some of that over the course of the weeks, but we need to get into chapter 1. We need to get into the account here, or else we won't make any headway. So let's go into chapter 1. And in chapter 1, we see the king with no clothes on. So we begin with this king, King Xerxes. Now, that's his Greek name. His Persian name is Ahasuerus, right? Ahasuerus. I'm not going to say Ahasuerus 1,000 times in the sermon. So it's either Ahash or Xerxes. I think I'll stick with Xerxes. But Xerxes is his Greek name. And the story begins with this great king, right? The king, great and powerful, rules this empire. It says from Ethiopia to India, 127 provinces. His was an empire that was feared and was just incredibly opulent and dove into excess. And here in the 3rd year of his reign, he's in his 30s now. In the 3rd year of his reign, there's a relative time of peace because there's been so much land conquered that he decides to throw a little bit of a party. A 6-month kegger. 180 days of partying with the power players on the scene, right? The nobles, the governors, the princes, the superstars, celebrities, the generals, the captains. A party that lasted 180 days, guys. I know some of us partied hard in college. I get that. But not this. 180 days of showing off his splendor and his pomp. 180 days of showing off his treasures. 180 days of bragging about his palace, his power, his control, and his opulence. Now, you think he'd be partied out, right? Well, when that party's over, what's the next best thing to do? Well, you throw another party. So now he throws a 7-day party. And this party is open to everyone in Susa, right? All the blue collar, the white collar, the black collar, the green collar, everyone. Everyone can get to come into this palace and check it out and gawk at all of the treasures and drink from the king's cups. He throws this 7-day rager for all the people of Susa. And this took place outside the palace, but mainly outside in these garden areas with these porticos, right? These really cool courtyards that had gardens all surrounding them. And the author goes to great lengths, like incredible lengths, to describe in detail the scene. Why? This is really important. So let's read verses 6 through 8. This is Esther chapter 1, verses 6 through 8. It says this. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods and marble pillars, and also couches of gold. Couches of gold. And silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, precious stones. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavish according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. For 7 days, everyone could drink what they want, eat what they want, get as loaded as they want, do whatever. Why? What is the point of all of this detail? I mean, what do we see here? Well, again, our author's bending over backwards to paint this portrait of power, of mind-boggling wealth and impressive opulence. And see that line, by the way, where it says vessels of different kinds right in the middle? Yeah, go ahead. You can go to the slide. They found one of them. This is what they were drinking their beer out of and their wine. Pure gold. And it's interesting, it says different, right? It says different vessels, different kinds. That is in there for a very specific reason, because the idea is that no two of these were alike, that there were thousands of these drinking goblets, right? These golden goblets, these horns that you could put wine in. And they were all different, all made of gold and all made of silver. And everyone who came in got this golden thing to get loaded on. Like, that's how much gold you have? That you just make as many cups as possible, right? Forget red Solo cups. Go with these, right? The point that our author is making is golden vessels of different kinds, no two alike. They were all different. All these artisans poured in their skill so people could get drunk and feel like this king is a good king. This is a party, right? It's crazy. It's just crazy. So our author is setting the scene. Xerxes is making a scene. He's making a statement about who he is. By the way, for you Bible nerds, this passage, let's go back to that verse there. This passage, this is for you Bible nerds. The only other place that there's a detail like this of a location in the Bible is with the temple, where you'd worship God. And then you have the gardens and the jewels, the walkways of jewels. So the whole idea is this is calling you back to the Garden of Eden and to the temple. Anyway, I'll leave that there, else I'll derail for the next half hour. But that is so cool, so many resonances with that. The point of all this is that we see a king with power and splendor on bombastic display. Behold, great Xerxes, the king of the world, right? The king who holds all the power, the king who holds all the influence, the king who holds all the riches, the king who commands and controls the armies, the king who controls the destinies of men and women, the king who has all the control. Portrait painted. But here's how, Esther is so cool. Like, no sooner is this portrait of power and control painted than it self-destructs and it crumbles right before our eyes. Look at this, verses 10 through verse 12, defying the king. Now on the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded, and here we get a list of names, Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bigtha, Abagtha, Zethar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty. For she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged and his anger burned within him. Okay, here's the scene. Seventh day of the look how great party that he's throwing. Look how great I am party, right? He's loaded. It says he's merry with much wine. It means he's stupid drunk. That's what that means in Hebrew. He's just stupid drunk, and he gets this crazy idea. He knows how to bring this party to this ultimate climax. I'm going to parade my beautiful queen in front of everyone. So he calls 7 eunuchs, his servants, to go get Queen Vashti and say, you're to wear your crown and come on out. She's going to be eye candy for everyone. Here is the ultimate trophy wife. He's already shown all of his other treasures, and now it's time to show off the beauty that he knows. And the scriptures say here that she was beautiful, and his whole intent is to make other men lust. By the way, all the men are at this party, all the women are at Queen Vashti's party, and she's pulled out of her party, or going to be pulled out of her party with the women, so she can walk around and be almost a pornographic display. And all sorts of commentators say, well, the idea of wear your crown means something. It just means just her crown. Others think it means open robes. We don't know. But the whole point is that he wants other people to be jealous of him and want what he alone has, to feed his ego. Man. Regardless, whatever she's wearing, she is being beckoned to be used, to be put on display, to be an object of desire to satisfy the king's own bloated ego. And what's her awesome response? Not a chance. Not happening. It's not going to happen. She refuses to be used, to be gawked at, to be ego fodder for Xerxes, who is 3 sheets to the wind, stupid drunk. Not going to happen. And of course, the king's enraged, right? His fragile ego balloon is popped, right? And of course, he's loaded at this point. He doesn't want to look stupid in front of his guests. No one tells the king, no, this is the king of the earth, the king of kings. So what does he do? He calls his counselors in and says, what do I do? What do I do? So the counselors of the Persian court, they think it over, and one pipes up and says, well, you banish Queen Vashti. Or you vanish her. You banish her. You get rid of Queen Vashti. Not only that, I got an idea, because this is what evil counselors do. I got an idea. Let's put out a decree. Let's put out an edict and send it to all of the provinces. Everyone will know everywhere that the women need to and must respect their husbands. Let's coerce them into respect. Now, this is brilliant. Come on. We should be laughing at this point. Because here's what's going on. They go, oh no, the kingdom is threatened. The wife, the queen, says she won't come to her husband. Social unrest, social disorder, chaos, the apocalypse is about to descend on us. No one can find out about this. Here's an idea. Let's publish it to the entire empire. This is so stupid. This idea is so stupid, it hurts the brain. And the king is like, that's a great idea. So they don't want anyone to find out about this. So what they do is they decide to get the PR machine going, right? The whole mechanism of the empire going, get the Pony Express going, the postal service out there, so everyone knows everywhere that the women are supposed to respect the men because Queen Vashti didn't. So now everyone knows he's a buffoon. And then they're going to coerce and enforce respect. How is that going to go? Like this is just total buffoonery. We should be laughing at this point. See, this is satire. The Bible is full of satire. Right here at the beginning of the story, we see this all-powerful, all-in-control king for what he really is. The king with no clothes on. You know the tale of the emperor's new clothes, right? A king, absurdly rich, his own bloated ego, he's duped by some shyster tailors into wearing clothes made of such finely spun golden fabric that he parades around town, what? Naked. He's naked, right? And he's walking around thinking he's wearing the best clothes until a kid in the crowd says, the emperor's not wearing any clothes, right? Calls out the obvious. The emperor's not wearing any clothes. He's deluded. His ego has blinded him. He's not seeing reality for what it is. So it is with Xerxes. He's the king with no clothes on. He has no true power. This king who thinks he's in control of the empire is not in control at all, and the whole story starts to crumble. His narrative of control and power starts to crumble right before us. This book is so brilliant. Look at verse 8. Look at his control freak nature in action here. Verse 8, and drinking was according to this edict, his edict. There is no compulsion, for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired. Now, generally what would happen back then is if you were at a party with the king, when the king drank, then you could drink. And if he's not drinking, then you don't drink. You take all your cues from him. But he says, I want everyone to just go crazy. And so the amount of control and control freak nature that's in this kingdom is at one point you can only drink if he drinks. But now he has to issue a coercive decree of non-coercion. He has to issue a coercive decree of non-coercion. Now everyone you go and you do what you want. Like this is an empire of control and it's all falling apart. So our author sets up a tower of the power of the king, of the toy blocks, and it looks silly and foolish, and our author knocks it down and shows that this king has no clothes on. Because if anyone in the world was clothed in power and ability to control his life and the life of others, it was this King of Kings. This one who had power over 50 million people, half the world's population at the time. But the emperor's naked, no clothes. It's all ego, it's all illusion, it's all petty bureaucracy. And I'm not saying he couldn't do violence and couldn't do damage, but true power was not his. So why does the author go at lengths to tell us these things? Well, in contrast to this show-off king who has no control, we are going to see a hidden king, a veiled king behind the scenes who has true power and is truly in control. So this book acts as an expose of earthly power and reveals the difference between earthly power and heavenly power. It reveals the difference between the kingdom of coercion, of man's might and bullying, and then the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of affection, the kingdom of love. And the satire here, as all satire has done for millennia, mocks and exposes the oppressor. It punctures the illusion of the invincible reign of the evil empire. It makes fun of, it mocks the king who demands that you don't laugh at him. Xerxes can't control Queen Vashti. Xerxes can't control the truth. Everyone knows what she said because of this PR. Xerxes' power undoes its own hold. His decree shows he's foolish. He rules with coercion, violent displays of power. But it's not true power. See, the kingdom of man, the kingdoms of this world, they push and they pull and they bully and they threaten and they say, you must. And the kingdom of heaven woos and draws and fills you with wonder and love. And the unnamed king behind the scenes is at work through all of this, right? God's providence, his governance of the world is guiding all of these chaotic, crazy threads into this beautiful tapestry that will ultimately lead to the salvation of God's people through Esther. And how is it that Esther comes onto the scene to be an agent of God's salvation? Because Xerxes makes stupid, awful decisions and banishes Queen Vashti, so then Queen Esther can come on the scene and defy the king even more and save God's people. It's just so good. So here's what we need to see today, by the way. We are far less in control of our lives than we think. And God is far more involved than we now see. This is the good news of providence. If we can internalize this and live by this, this changes so much. We are far less in control of our lives than we think, and God is far more involved in our lives than we now see. This is such good news. Do you know what this does? This fights our despair and it fights our arrogance. Earthly power and control is an illusion. It is a vapor. Look, here's how it fights our despair. First, we have a great many Xerxes in our world today, don't we? Throwing their drinking parties, showing off their golden couches, and walking on their mother of pearl and jewel sidewalks. And wealth and power talk, and they talk loudly, and we buy into it. Egos and unwise rulers run parties and nations and kingdoms. They oppress and they hurt people. They throw temper tantrums at the nuclear world scene level. But we don't have to be afraid. Their power is not as powerful as they and we often think. Their control is not as controlling as they think and we often think. The powers that seem to control are not truly in control. And when we realize that there's a God who sits on the throne above every government, above every wicked leader, above every good leader, when we see that there is a God who is in control and is weaving all of these strands, that doesn't deactivate us from engaging the world. It actually activates us to engage because we're hopeful and we're energized because we know that this is going to culminate in the greatest happily ever after because what Jesus has done, continues to do, and will do. But we no longer have to be afraid of these worldly powers that throw their parties, right? That recline on their gold couches or refuse to get off their thrones and fight battles because they have other people fight them for them. And the Xerxes, by the way, when he went to battle, he didn't go in, he didn't have a six-pack, wasn't all ripped and like in the front lines. He was sitting on his gold throne behind 10,000 bodyguards, letting other people die for him. That's not how our king operates. It's quite the opposite, isn't it? He gets off his throne, comes to earth, dies in our place, and fights the fight that we can't fight and wins it. That's our Jesus. We are far less in control of our lives than we think. That is such good news because God is in control. So we don't have to be afraid. Second, it fights our arrogance and it humbles us. We're not in control of our lives. Thank God. Because we tend to make a mess of things and we're terrible gods. Have you noticed that? You're a really bad God. Most of us can't even do our own taxes, let alone hold the universe together. Yes, true, our actions have consequences. We are morally responsible agents. But the destiny of the world is in God's hands, not ours. And when you realize that you don't have to save the world and you don't have to hold it all together, freedom. Do you know why anxiety drives so many of us? Anxiety often comes from us trying to hold it all together and realizing we can't hold it together, and so we become anxious. We were never meant to hold the universe together. We were never meant to control our children. We don't own them. We are to be ambassadors, showing them the love of God, creating an atmosphere that cultivates the love of God, not control them and make them into the thing that we want them to be. We were never meant to micromanage each other at work. We were never meant to control our spouse and make them into the person of our own design. They were to be who God designed them to be. And when we start to pull our white-knuckle control freak nature off of these things, we can actually breathe and see people for who they're meant to be and trust God that He is in control of the universe, and it actually makes us more fun to be around. It allows us to breathe and to maybe even take time and slow down and live an unhurried life, because you know what? This universe will keep spinning even if you stop working. And because when you sleep, God is still at work. We are to take our hands off the wheel and let Him be God. We are so often like Xerxes in our little kingdoms. And all too often, the only thing that separates us from Xerxes is his pay scale and ours. We do the same thing that he does in our own home, our own little kingdom, or in our office, or in our cubicle, or in our own little world. We are too often like Xerxes rather than like Christ. True power. Now, do you know what true power looks like? It is often hidden. It often goes unnamed. It often looks poor and unassuming. It often looks vulnerable, and so we miss it. And we buy into the world's models of power and control, Xerxesian models versus Christian models. So here's what happens. So often we look at the world that is around us with kings tantruming, tyrants tyranting, Grinches grinching, Loraxes loraxing, right? Rulers throwing their self-indulgent feasts and making terrible decrees, and we can't see God in it all. Where is He? Is He at work? I don't see the doctor on the pages. And the truth that Esther will teach us with every page is that God works in the spectacular and He works in the subtle. Yes, God in His providence, in His governance of the world, has split seas. He has burned bushes with heavenly fire. He has shaken Sinai with His radiant presence. But He most often works through the subtle, the ordinary, the everyday events of life. Heavenly power comes and subverts earthly power in humble and hidden ways. And one of the greatest ways is through me and you. That the Spirit of God would enter jars of clay like us, that his light, his divine heavenly light, would cover the earth. Real power comes as love, as giving of self, humility, lowliness. Real power is hidden in everyday, ordinary acts of sacrifice. Love is not proud. Love does not boast. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It doesn't seek trophy wives and post about itself in self-indulgent ways. It doesn't Instagram its golden couches. True power, do you know what it looks like? It looks like Jesus. When Jesus speaks of the kingdom of heaven come to earth, he says it's like what? A mustard seed. Tiny, small, humble, working beneath the surface. He says it's like leaven and bread. Hidden, working its work, making that dough rise. Real power is not like a boasting power player on his throne, an ego-blinded king with no clothes on. Rather, real power is like another kind of king. And interestingly enough, this other king is also a king with no clothes on. The Lord of the universe, King Jesus, naked on a cross, shamed for us, dying for others out of an invincible love. The one who should be arrayed in heavenly splendor is put on display naked and shamed. Here is a king, this Jesus, here is a king who would not call his bride in to be gawked at, to be used, and to be abused. Here is a king who would take the abuse on himself to protect his bride. Here is true power. And by the way, the greatest Me Too statement of all time is the cross of Jesus Christ. The cross that says, I know your abuse, and I know your violation, I know your shaming, and I know your violence. Me too. I will heal it all. God the Son came from heaven to earth, a humble blue-collar worker working behind the scenes, spending time with ordinary people, giving his life away among the peasants and the rabble, mostly ignoring the rich and famous and the buzzing paparazzi. Not reclining on these golden couches, but being put up on a rough cross. The one who controls the universe from spinning atoms to spiraling galaxies emptied himself to bring heaven to earth, and the book of Esther will point to him time and time again. And it's my prayer that as we explore Esther together, we will learn that God is powerfully at work, but that work looks different than we are naturally inclined to think because we've bought into worldly models of power. And so we don't see it. Our models of power and control are broken and bent, and the scriptures are meant to help us to see them anew in godly ways. And so my prayer for all of us as we go through this journey together is may the book of Esther be such a guide for us. So when we look around and read the pages of life and everything seems rushing headlong into disaster and it all feels spiraling out of control, and we say, I don't see the doctor. Where's the doctor? He's not here. May God help us through his word, through Esther, through each other, to see that not only is he not absent, but he is so intimately present and involved that he will use the smallest, most subtle, hidden, and humble things in your life to bring about his promises and the longed for happily ever after that our hearts crave. The good news of providence. We are far less in control than we think, and God is far more involved than we see. That's something to celebrate. Heavenly Father, you are a good dad. Lord Jesus, thank you that though you are the King of heaven, you would be the King with no clothes on that cross, taking our shame and guilt and freeing us and giving us your Holy Spirit that we might wield the ultimate power of loving others. God, it says you are love. You are love. And when we display your love in this world, we display the power of God. May that be the case with this church. Now may we sing with these praises on our lips. For you are worthy. You own all the gold in the hills. You hold it all together. You are the true King who would fight and die for his people, that they would be lifted up. We love you, Lord. You are an incredible Lord. You are King of kings, Lord of all the earth, the great I am. Thank you. It's in the name of Christ we pray. Amen.